Okay, hello everyone. Welcome again. This is me welcoming you to Roma, Italia. I'm about to start a three-part series on the crown jewels of Rome, the Colosseum. So I hope you're going to join me for this three-part series. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and find out all the things that you thought you knew about the Colosseum or you thought you knew about Rome. But interestingly, there are lots of interesting facts to find out more about this great work of superb Roman engineering behind me. The first thing you need to know about the Colosseum is its name. The Romans didn't call it the Colosseum. You can imagine it was actually called the Flavian Amphitheater. It only in recent times that, because it was so colossal, it was massive, and it was a meeting place for the Romans. So it was a forum. So a colossal forum, Colosseum. And that's how the name came to be. But it was originally called the Flavian Amphitheater. And if you walk around the building, you will see the name of that. But many people overlook the Colosseum because it's just a stadium, right? It's just one massive stadium that some emperor decided he was going to build. But the feat of Roman engineering, when you look deep into the Colosseum, it's really marvelous. When you think that this was built in the 1st century AD, 2,000 years ago, there were no cranes, there were no tractors. In fact, machinery, it was only cattle and things that they used then. So it is really incredible feat of Roman engineering. What a lot of people don't know is that the site in which the Colosseum was built was actually a lake, because Vestavia, who built it at the time, wanted to build the biggest stadium that would house more than 50,000 Romans. They were very big theaters at that time, but this one was going to be Rome's greatest, and it was going to be the world's greatest. And it did turn out to be, seating more than 50,000 people when it was completed. But it started off as a lake, and you can imagine 2,000 years ago, actually drenching that lake, removing the water, and all the engineering that meant to get the water out of that lake, the size of 6 football fields, and draining it, having a network of plumbing that drains it right into the River Tiber, almost a kilometer away. So plumbing was at its highest. The Roman engineers were really at the top of their game at that time. Now, what does it take to build a great structure like this at such a time? I know what you're thinking. Money. Loads and loads of money and loads of labor. But for those of you that know history, Rome at that time, there was an economic crisis. So there was no money. People were living in squalor. The emperors had squandered the riches of Rome, and it was really a tough time economically. Some would say not very different from what we have today, post-COVID pandemic in many economies in the world. However, they needed money and they needed labor, lots and lots of it. So if you're a Roman emperor, and you need money and you have a great big project, what do? Well, you invade another country, right? So at that time, the emperor went to Jerusalem, got the Roman armies together and invaded Jerusalem, the temples of Jerusalem and the riches there, and all the gold in the temples and in the churches in Jerusalem. They squandered the place. They really. And of course, they brought back slaves, many slaves. In fact, it's estimated that at the time the Colosseum was built, almost a quarter of the Roman population were working on the Colosseum. So if you think about it, in the 1st century AD, a big, massive city of 1 million people, and you have a quarter of those all working in some shape or form on this gigantic structure. So of course, slaves were a key part of that. But there's one thing you should know. To build this required expertise, it required engineering. Of course, slaves did not have that. It would have cost too much money, it would have taken too much time to try and train them all so that there'd be expert plumbers and expert builders and expert carpenters and expert smithsmen, etc., etc. So what did they do? They sold the slaves. So there were auctions all over Rome of slaves. Vestavia wanted to acquire a lot more money so that he could build this center showpiece, the Colosseum of Rome. And of course, if you Google and if you look at what are the most recognizable monuments in the world today, you're sure always that the Colosseum will be in the top 10 of that list. The very recognized building. And why is that? Because the feat of engineering at this time was significant. This building is built of solid stone. That's why it's still standing. But bear in mind that if you build solid stone, which by the way was carted from the mountains outside of Rome by cattle, by cart, they brought big slabs of Rome. It is estimated that every day about 200 carts brought stone from the mountains, cut stone and brought it over to build this gigantic Colosseum. If you think about that going on for years and years, then you can imagine the amount of work that went into building this. But it wasn't just about might, it was about intelligence. The Roman, they created the red brick, they created cement. So if you think about it, when they mixed this malleable substance we now know as cement. And that was how they were able to create all sorts of ingenuities in the whole part of this building behind me. In order for it to stand, because imagine if you had loads of solid stone and block one after the other, of course it's going to crumble under its own weight. So this is why the Rome, they built the ark. It's really an arc of stone pieces which they cut so that they support each other and it forms its own structure. It was really amazing feat. Of course, the other thing was when it was being built by Vestavia at the time, one of the problems could be flooding. So imagine if it rains significantly and the stadium gets flooded. Of course, that was going to be an issue. So the plumbing in this system, the way the rain really comes out in multiple aqueducts all the way to the river Tiber. Obviously not too high a slope, otherwise the water would push back, or not too low a slope, otherwise the water would not go through. So the Romans devised the exact gradient at which the rain would come out of the Colosseum and go into the river Tiber. If you look at it, every architect marvels at what they did, not forgetting this was indeed 2,000 years ago. The seating was magnificent. There are many things about it. This Colosseum was not just a building for sports. It was a meeting place for politicians. It showed where you were in society. And it was free for all Romans. So all Romans could go to the Colosseum for the games for free. And it was, as I said before, it was a time of economic crisis. It was time of a lot of issues going on in the city of Rome. So people were not happy, but this was their one outlet. This was the time when they could come and they could see the might of Rome. Rumor has it, actually it's not rumor, it's actually true because there's evidence of it, that on the inaugural day when the Colosseum was open, there was a spectacular show of 100 lions and 100 lionesses, a spectacular battle. All these animals were brought from far and wide on the globe. It showed Rome's power. Elephants, exotic animals, birds, all sorts of animals, lions, tigers, were brought here for magnificent shows of battle and slaughter. It was very interesting because if you look at the Rome, if you look at the Colosseum, right round it, there are about 80 entrances. And when you walk around, and if you look close enough, you will see that each of these entrances has a number on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right up to 80. And basically, depending on your status in society, decided on which entrance you took. So if you were a blacksmith or a plumber, or you were a worker or a slave, there were various entrances that you used. You know, the Romans was a very hierarchical society. So the senators and the princes and all those, the politicians and the businessmen, they had their own entrance. And those entrances that they used took them straight to the center of the Colosseum. They didn't want to mix with the plebeians. But the plebeians, they had to walk up loads and loads of flights of steps right up to the top ring of the Colosseum, so they wouldn't bump into any of the senators or the really elite people of Rome in the day. So it was a very hierarchical society. So wherever you were sitting in the Colosseum, people knew what part in society you were. People knew what your status in society was. So it was almost a place where people would express who they were. But then at that point, everyone got together and believed in Rome as the great Roman Empire, and the battles happened so often.